Chosen one, there was a time when you stood trembling in the light of your own truth, not because you doubted it, but because you finally saw how much it threatened the comfortable darkness around you. You didn't speak to wound, you didn't speak to boast, you spoke because your spirit demanded it. The words you carried burned in your chest like sacred fire, and when you released them, the air shifted. The illusion shattered. Suddenly, silence became heavy, glances turned sharp, and the very people who once claimed to understand you began to turn away. They didn't just reject what you said, they rejected the reflection of themselves your truth exposed. And for a while, it felt like you had lost everything. You walked through the ache of isolation, through the desolate spaces where your name was spoken only in whispers and half-truths. You felt the weight of misunderstanding pressing down on your soul like a sentence you never deserved. They called you difficult. They called you ungrateful. They called you selfish for choosing honesty over approval. But what they didn't see, what they refused to see, was that you weren't trying to destroy anything. You were trying to free it. You were trying to bring clarity where confusion had become currency. You were trying to bring light to a place that had grown too comfortable in the shadows. And though it seemed you were cast out, heaven was rearranging the scene. Spirit was removing those who could not stand in the frequency of your growth. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Every cold shoulder, every back turned, every betrayal whispered behind your back was sacred alignment in disguise. You were being refined. You were being prepared for the weight of your calling. You were not losing people, you were losing illusions. Now time has passed. The air feels different. The energy has shifted again. And the same mouths that once accused you are beginning to stumble on their own words. They are realizing that their certainty about you was nothing more than projection dressed as truth. They are starting to backtrack, carefully, nervously, pretending not to notice how the same truth they condemned you for has begun to surface in their own lives. The things you said are now echoing through their circumstances. The lessons you lived through are now being taught to them by life itself. They remember how confident they were when they dismissed you. They remember how unified their judgment felt when they painted you as the villain of the story. But something in their hearts has begun to crumble. The conviction they once wore like armor is cracking, and through those cracks, realization seeps in. The truth you carried was never cruel, it was cleansing. The truth you spoke was not rejection, it was revelation. You were the mirror they couldn't face, and in turning from you, they turned away from their own healing. Chosen one, Spirit wants you to understand something deeply. Your silence was never weakness. Your withdrawal was never defeat. The quiet space that followed your exile was your cocoon. It was the holy ground of transformation. While they whispered, you evolved. While they strategized your downfall, you rose in unseen dimensions. While they crafted narratives to preserve their comfort, you were busy becoming the embodiment of truth they feared. Every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of doubt was not wasted, it was consecrated. You were being rebuilt from the inside out, molded into someone who no longer needs validation to know their worth. And now, they feel it. The shift. The imbalance. The absence of your light. The same energy that they once took for granted has become the silence haunting their rooms. They don't say it out loud, but they feel it in the hollowness of their victories, in the emptiness of their connections, in the uneasy stillness that follows their laughter. The conversations they once had about you are now tainted with guilt. The certainty they once clung to has turned to doubt. They are replaying the moments where you spoke truth, and for the first time, they can feel the weight of your words. Some of them will try to come back, chosen one. Not with apologies worthy of your pain, but with casual greetings disguised as peace offerings. They will try to rewrite history by pretending it never happened. "Hey, how have you been?" they'll say, as if the wound never existed, as if their silence didn't pierce you deeper than any blade could. Don't mistake their comfort for clarity. Most aren't coming back out of love, they're coming back out of fear. Fear that they've lost access to someone their soul knows is divine. Fear that they have fallen too far from the light that used to reflect off your presence. You represent something they don't yet understand, the standard of self-respect that exposes their compromises. Your boundaries made them uncomfortable because they were accustomed to relationships built on emotional shortcuts and half-truths. Your refusal to stay small revealed their dependency on control. Your detachment revealed their addiction to chaos. They didn't hate you because you were wrong, they resented you because you were free. And now, that freedom echoes. It echoes in their dreams, in their conversations, in the strange discomfort that arises when your name is mentioned. It echoes because somewhere deep within, they know they owe you something, not an apology of words, but an acknowledgement of truth. But that acknowledgement requires humility, and humility is something pride resists until it breaks. And Spirit, in divine orchestration, is breaking it. Not out of vengeance, but for revelation. The truth must be seen for what it is. Chosen one, the path you walked was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right, to your own soul, your own intuition, your own divine knowing. You carried a light that didn't need approval to shine. But now, as the veil lifts, those who once mocked your silence will feel the power of your peace. They will sense that you are not waiting for their apology, you have outgrown the need for it. Your evolution is their lesson. You see, the ones who turned against you were not your enemies, they were your teachers in disguise. They taught you who you no longer are. They taught you what frequencies no longer belong in your space. They taught you that your energy is sacred currency and not everyone can afford its cost. They taught you discernment. They taught you how to walk alone and still feel whole. And now, Spirit is saying, you will witness the reversal. Not because you demanded it, but because truth always reclaims its ground. There is justice moving silently in the background. It is not loud. It does not shout. It is the slow, certain reordering of energy. Every lie spoken against you is being weighed. Every illusion used to diminish you is collapsing under its own weight. You don't have to do anything but continue walking in your integrity. Keep your peace clean, chosen one. Let your light speak the language they tried to silence. The time of hidden justice is upon you. Doors that once slammed shut are opening wider than before. Opportunities are aligning with your frequency because you refuse to lower it. Those who mocked your faith are about to witness its fruit. Those who doubted your purpose will soon recognize your glow, not because you sought their validation, but because your anointing cannot be ignored. Your elevation will not come from revenge, but from restoration. You are not rising to prove a point. You are rising because it was always written. And still they'll talk. They'll say, "You've changed." But you know the truth, you didn't change. You became who you were always meant to be once the noise was gone. They'll say, "You think you're better now." But you'll smile, knowing that you never wanted to be better, you only wanted to be whole. They'll interpret your peace as distance, your boundaries as arrogance, your clarity as cruelty, because they're still looking through the lens of fear. But you'll stand firm, unshaken, because the foundation you've built wasn't crafted from approval. It was built on revelation. And as they backtrack, you'll see it clearly, not all returns are reconciliations. Some people come back not to rebuild, but to re-enter the energy they once fed off of. Spirit will give you the discernment to know the difference. Some will come humbled, truly ready to face their reflection. Others will come pretending to have changed, hoping to regain access without paying the price of truth. You will know them by their energy, not their words. Truth recognizes itself. Chosen one, remember this, you are not obligated to reopen doors that God has sealed. You are not required to explain your peace to those who mistook your silence for weakness. Your healing is not a group project. You owe no one access to the version of you they crucified. Let them watch your resurrection from afar if they couldn't honor your crucifixion up close. Had is your justice, existing in fullness while they wrestle with the fragments of what they lost. Their whispers have changed now. They no longer say, "Who does the chosen one think they are?" They ask quietly, "How did they do it? How did they survive what should have broken them?" They don't realize it yet, but their curiosity is the first stage of awakening. Spirit is using your story as their mirror. You are the proof that light wins, not because it's louder, but because it lasts. So stand tall, chosen one. You have already outgrown their misunderstanding. You have already surpassed the season of needing to be seen. You are no longer explaining your essence to those committed to misinterpreting it. You have nothing to prove. You are walking evidence of divine justice, the living embodiment of what it means to turn pain into purpose, betrayal into breakthrough, loss into legacy. And when they finally see the full truth, when the weight of their own denial collapses around them, extend grace, but not access. Forgive, but don't regress. Bless, but don't bend. You are not the same soul who was once desperate to be understood. You are the awakened one who understands that not everyone deserves proximity to peace. They will remember you, chosen one. Not just for what you said, but for how you endured. They will remember that your truth never needed defending, it only needed time. And time, as always, reveals everything. You spoke, they denied, and now the truth stands alone, untouched, unshaken, and undeniable. You are the living reminder that divine justice doesn't need revenge. It needs patience. Because everything that was taken from you unjustly is finding its way back in ways more beautiful than you imagined. You didn't lose, it was all a setup for revelation. And now, as their whispers turn to silence, your peace will speak the loudest. Chosen one, they are backtracking not because you changed, but because truth finally caught up with them. Stand firm in the light you carry. You have nothing to chase, nothing to prove, nothing to fear. The same people who couldn't handle your truth will soon honor your existence. Stay in alignment, stay grounded, and remember, you didn't lose them, they lost access to you. And that is the divine difference. They called it arrogance, chosen one. They called it cruelty, defiance, rebellion. They said you were heartless, ungrateful, and unteachable. But beneath every insult, beneath every attempt to tear down your character, there was only one emotion pulsing through their spirit: fear. The kind of fear that doesn't scream, but hides behind moral masks and half-spoken judgments. The kind that disguises envy as concern and insecurity as righteousness. The kind that whispers, "If I admit they're right, then I'll have to face the part of me that isn't." They were never truly angry at you, beloved. They were terrified of you, not for what you could do, but for what you could see. You saw through them, through the layers they spent years building to protect their fragile sense of self. You didn't fall for their masks, and that was the ultimate threat. People can tolerate being disliked, but they can't tolerate being seen. You saw their contradictions. You saw the dissonance between their words and their energy. You saw the truth they'd been avoiding about themselves, and once seen, they couldn't hide from it anymore. When your spirit started radiating authenticity, it activated something in them, not admiration, but agitation. Your light didn't just illuminate your path, it exposed the shadows they buried deep within. And when people who live in illusion are confronted with truth, they don't surrender, they retaliate. That retaliation is what they called justice. That gossip was what they called accountability. That exile was what they called peace. But it was all a smokescreen, a desperate attempt to protect the fragile ecosystem of lies they built to survive. Fear. That was the root. Fear of your calmness. Fear of your strength. Fear of your refusal to crumble when the world demanded your breakdown. They couldn't understand how someone who had walked through the fire could still stand with grace. It didn't make sense to them. To their wounded minds, healing looked like denial, peace looked like distance, and confidence looked like arrogance. They projected every part of themselves they were unwilling to heal onto you because it was easier to call you too much than to admit they'd been living too little. You became the mirror of everything they weren't ready to face. And mirrors, chosen one, are dangerous to those who hate their reflection. That's why they tried to crack you, distort you, label you. It wasn't about truth, it was about protection, not of you, but of their illusions. The illusion that they were always right. The illusion that they were the moral ones. The illusion that they were better because they were louder. Your silence destroyed those illusions. Your composure made their chaos look obvious. Your clarity made their confusion impossible to justify. What they really feared was exposure. You walked into their lives as light, not demanding, not forceful, simply radiant. And light, by its nature, reveals. It reveals what's hidden. It reveals what's unhealed. It reveals what's been carefully edited to appear acceptable. So when you showed up with your truth, they felt naked. They felt the hollowness behind their performances. They felt the dissonance between their masks and their souls. They felt the walls crumble, and rather than rebuild with honesty, they turned their anger toward you. Who do they think they are? They asked. And the universe whispered back, they are what you pretend to be. But they couldn't hear that whisper. They were too busy defending their image, too afraid to face their own fragility. So they pointed fingers. They rewrote stories. They used your authenticity as evidence of your flaws. They convinced others that your confidence was ego, your discernment was judgment, your boundaries were betrayal. But all of that noise, all of that drama, was the sound of fear trying to disguise itself as certainty. They feared your truth because it didn't ask for their permission. You didn't wait for their validation to speak what you knew. You didn't soften your light to fit their comfort zone. And that audacity to exist without their approval, is what shook them the most. You embody freedom, and freedom always terrifies those still chained to performance. They were afraid of what your truth demanded of them. Because once truth is spoken, everyone who hears it is faced with a choice: evolve or resist. Evolve into honesty or retreat into delusion. You didn't just confront their lies, you confronted their excuses. You didn't just show them another way. You showed them that their suffering was optional, that their victimhood was self-maintained. And for many, that was unbearable. It's easier to blame the messenger than to accept the message. You were never cruel, chosen one, you were catalytic. Your words burned not because they were mean, but because they were medicine. And medicine tastes bitter to those addicted to pain. You represented healing, and healing threatens everything built on brokenness. Their fear wasn't of you failing, it was of you succeeding, because your success would expose the truth that they could have risen to, if they'd only faced themselves. Their fear of not measuring up wasn't about status, looks, or achievements. It was spiritual. You showed them what self-accountability looks like. You showed them what it means to be at peace without pretending. You showed them that inner work is louder than performance. That terrified them because it stripped them of excuses. They couldn't blame the world for their stagnation anymore once they saw that you came from the same pain and still chose to evolve. So they did what frightened souls do. They painted your strength as pride, your standards as cruelty. Because it's easier to demonize what you don't understand than to accept what you could become. But Spirit saw it all. Spirit saw the tears you cried in silence after being called names for simply standing in truth. Spirit saw you questioning your worth after being treated like an outcast for refusing to lie. Spirit saw you swallow your pain instead of defending yourself, because you knew arguing with illusion would only lower your frequency. Spirit saw it all, and Spirit recorded every moment. And now, as divine order unfolds, they're being shown the same mirror they shattered. They're seeing their words boomerang back, their judgments turn into self-reflection, their accusations become lessons. It's not punishment, it's clarity. They are starting to realize that what they feared in you was never arrogance. It was awareness. It was the kind of awareness that reveals the unseen, the kind that requires accountability, the kind that cannot coexist with denial. Your truth didn't break them, it gave them the chance to wake up. Whether they take it or not is their choice. But you've already chosen. You've chosen peace over pity, purpose over people-pleasing, alignment over attachment. And that's why their fear no longer touches you. Because you finally understand, the way they perceived you was never about you. It was about the war within themselves. So stand tall, chosen one. Let them call you arrogant. Humility doesn't mean self-erasure. Let them call you cruel. Compassion doesn't mean self-betrayal. Let them call you heartless. Discernment isn't cold, it's sacred. You don't owe softness to those who mistake honesty for hostility. You owe truth to yourself, and that's exactly what you gave. The illusion has cracked, and their fear is unraveling. You no longer need to defend who you are. Your peace is proof. Your growth is the evidence. The same people who once doubted you are quietly observing, questioning, reflecting. They won't say it out loud, but they know now, the arrogance they accused you of was confidence. The cruelty they condemned was clarity, and the fear they projected was never yours to carry. It was always theirs. Keep walking in truth, chosen one. Let their fear dissolve in the light of your authenticity. The ones meant for you will never fear your power, they'll be inspired by it. Those who shrink from it were never meant to stand beside it. You are not here to be liked. You are here to awaken. And sometimes, awakening looks like fear to those still asleep. You didn't just reject one toxic person, chosen one, you shattered an entire illusion. What you walked away from wasn't merely a single relationship, a single manipulator, or a single betrayal. You walked away from an entire system of delusion that had been carefully constructed by multiple souls who depended on it to avoid facing their own truth. When you said, "No more," you didn't just disrupt one connection, you sent shockwaves through an entire energetic structure built on denial, projection, and comfort. These people weren't bound by truth, they were bound by the stories they told themselves to survive. Stories that painted them as righteous, selfless, forgiving, when, in reality, they were addicted to dysfunction disguised as loyalty. They weren't ready to face how much of their identity was built around enabling pain. So when you stood up, when you refused to participate, when you removed yourself from the lie, you didn't just walk away, you exposed the architecture of illusion they'd built their lives on. That's why their reaction was so violent, so emotional, so exaggerated. It was never just about you. It was about the mirror you became. You didn't harm them, you reflected them. You showed them how much they had betrayed themselves in the name of belonging. You showed them the truth they had buried under years of pretending. And to protect that comfort, they needed to turn you into the villain. Villainizing you was their only defense against transformation. It allowed them to keep their false sense of goodness intact. "They're crazy," they said. "They're selfish. They've changed." No, chosen one, you evolved. You simply stopped enabling. But to those addicted to dysfunction, boundaries look like betrayal, and truth sounds like attack. When people are forced to face their reflection, they will often destroy the mirror just to avoid the sight of themselves. They couldn't handle the version of you that stopped explaining, that stopped apologizing, that stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. They couldn't handle the version of you that didn't flinch when they withdrew approval. Because for so long, your empathy was their shelter. You were their safe place to hide from accountability. You absorbed the chaos, you soothed their wounds, you forgave before they apologized, and when you stopped doing that, their illusion of being good people started to fall apart. And that's the truth most won't admit. They didn't lose you because you were wrong. They lost you because you stopped pretending that their dysfunction was normal. You stopped accepting crumbs and calling it love. You stopped lowering your frequency to maintain connection. You stopped carrying what wasn't yours to carry. And by doing so, you forced everyone around you to see the truth they were running from. Chosen one, what you did was sacred. You didn't just walk away, you broke a pattern. You disrupted a generational loop. You tore down the energetic scaffolding of lies that entire groups of people were standing on. That's why your departure caused such chaos. You think you left one person behind, but in truth, you confronted the entire ecosystem that allowed that toxicity to thrive. When you said, "This isn't love," you didn't just challenge the abuser, you challenged every enabler who said, "But they mean well." When you said, "I deserve peace," you didn't just heal yourself, you confronted the belief that suffering equals virtue. When you said, "This behavior isn't acceptable," you forced others to realize how much unacceptable behavior they've been tolerating in their own lives. You didn't just heal, you triggered awakening in everyone connected to the illusion. And awakening, chosen one, is messy. It's uncomfortable. People don't celebrate the one who wakes them up, they resent them. Because waking up means dismantling identities built on lies. It means letting go of the comfort of victimhood. It means admitting, "Maybe I was wrong." And that level of humility isn't easy for souls still feeding their egos. So instead, they project. They blame. They rewrite the story to preserve their pride. That's why they needed to make you the villain. Because if you were the problem, they didn't have to change. If they could convince themselves that your truth was cruelty, they could keep living in the lie that comforted them. They could stay in the narrative that said, We're good people. We didn't do anything wrong. They just lost it. It's self-preservation disguised as morality. But here's the divine irony. Every attempt to villainize you only exposed more of their own shadow. Every lie they told about you became a confession of what they feared within themselves. Every time they called you cold, they revealed their inability to love without control. Every time they called you arrogant, they exposed their dependence on superiority. Every time they said you were fake, they unconsciously admitted how much they were pretending. Your absence has become their mirror now. Without you to absorb the distortion, their illusion has no anchor. The stories are unraveling. The masks are slipping. The people who joined in the chorus of accusation are now whispering questions to themselves at night. What if the chosen one wasn't the problem? What if they were the only honest one among us? The seeds of truth you planted are growing in the cracks of their denial. And you don't need to say a word. You don't need to prove your innocence. Your energy has already testified. Your peace has already become evidence. The calm in your spirit speaks louder than their frantic explanations. The elevation in your frequency invalidates every lie they told. You don't need to clear your name. Life is doing it for you. Spirit wants you to understand that every time you stood your ground, you were collapsing illusions in the unseen. You were liberating not just yourself, but others who were silently suffering under the same pattern. Your refusal to play small was an act of spiritual warfare, not against people, but against the energy of deception that had ruled the atmosphere for far too long. That's why it hurt so deeply. That's why it felt so heavy. You weren't fighting individuals, you were dismantling systems. Now those systems are shaking. Truth is reclaiming its ground. The very people who once rallied against you are being forced to face the consequences of the lies they defended. The manipulator they protected is showing their true colors. The peace they pretended to have is cracking under the weight of avoidance. The illusion is collapsing, and though they may try to resist it, they can no longer unsee the truth. Chosen one, understand this clearly. The storm you endured was never punishment, it was purification. You were chosen to expose what was hidden. You were chosen to bring light to the places that thrived in secrecy. You were chosen to show others that love without accountability isn't love, it's bondage. And even if they hated you for it, you fulfilled your purpose. Now, as their illusions crumble, you'll feel the shift. Some will try to return, pretending they never turned against you. Others will remain silent, watching from afar as your peace continues to expand. Let them. You don't owe them proximity. You don't need them to admit their wrongs for your healing to be real. Your power is not in their apology, it's in your ascension. You didn't just reject one toxic person. You dismantled an entire illusion that multiple people depended on to avoid their reflection. You were the earthquake that shook false foundations. You were the divine disruption that forced dormant souls to stir. They needed to villainize you to protect their comfort, but comfort is a fragile god, and it's falling apart before their eyes. So stand tall, chosen one. You didn't destroy anything that was real. You only shattered what could no longer survive in truth. And now, as the dust settles, what remains is pure, your essence, your integrity, your peace. You didn't lose them. You freed yourself. And one day, they'll realize that the very illusion they defended was what cost them the presence of someone who was trying to lead them into light. They didn't hate you because you lied, chosen one. They hated you because you told the truth, the kind of truth that pierces illusions and forces reflection. Your words carried weight not because they were cruel, but because they were real. And reality is unbearable for those who have built their identity on fantasy. You spoke the kind of truth that strips the mask off pretenders, that makes people look at themselves without their filters. You weren't attacking them, you were awakening them. But awakening feels like destruction when someone has lived too long in denial. You didn't speak from malice, you spoke from clarity. Yet clarity, to the unhealed, feels like judgment. You weren't trying to wound, you were trying to reveal. But they had spent so many years protecting their wounds that your light felt invasive. You triggered the parts of them they swore they had buried, the traumas they refused to acknowledge, the lies they repeated until they sounded holy. You didn't break them, chosen one, you interrupted their illusion. Understand this: people don't resent liars nearly as much as they resent those who see through lies. The liar still plays the game, still protects the narrative, still feeds the illusion that everyone depends on. But the truth teller? The truth teller threatens the entire structure. You were that threat. Not because you were harsh or unkind, but because your very presence made pretense impossible. Your frequency made deceit tremble. Your discernment made manipulation collapse. They resonated with the wrong person, not because that person was right, but because that person offered them comfort in their denial. Misery loves company, but more than that, denial loves validation. And they found validation in the ones who told them what they wanted to hear. The ones who said, "You're fine. You're not the problem. They're just too much." The ones who agreed with their story because they shared the same blindness. That's why they couldn't stand you, because you refused to play along. You wouldn't co-sign dysfunction. You wouldn't soften your words to soothe fragile egos. You refused to pretend that their avoidance was healing. You saw through their self-righteousness, through their pity parties, through their subtle manipulations disguised as kindness. You saw through the projection, the gaslighting, the performance. You didn't buy into it, and that's what made you dangerous to them. They called you heartless, but really you were honest. They called you arrogant, but really you were aware. They called you cold, but really you were calm. They said you changed, but truthfully you returned to yourself, and that self no longer served their illusion. You didn't fit the role they cast you in. They wanted you to be the savior who stayed silent. They wanted you to be the empath who kept absorbing pain without question. But the moment you spoke truth, you broke character, and that made them furious. You became a living contradiction to their narrative. You refused to carry their guilt, refused to bow to their false morality, refused to participate in their unspoken contracts of silence. You shattered the illusion that they were victims of circumstance, and revealed that they were architects of their own chaos. You made them see how much of their suffering was self-inflicted, and that realization was unbearable. So they projected it all onto you. Chosen one, they didn't hate your truth, they hated what your truth demanded from them. It demanded change. It demanded accountability. It demanded growth. And for many, that's too high a price to pay. So instead of evolving, they retaliated. Instead of reflecting, they deflected. Instead of saying, "Maybe they're right," they said, "How dare they?" Because it was easier to demonize you than to dismantle their denial. They resonated with the wrong person because the wrong person didn't challenge them. The wrong person told them that ignorance was peace, that silence was grace, that pretending was maturity. They bonded over shared avoidance, not shared wisdom. They found safety in each other's blindness. They mistook mutual dysfunction for connection. They mistook enabling for loyalty. They mistook emotional numbness for strength. But the truth always has a way of resurfacing. Even in their alliance of denial, cracks began to form. The conversations that once fueled their confidence now feel empty. The people who validated their delusion are beginning to reveal their own hypocrisy. The ones they trusted are showing the same manipulative traits they once accused you of. Slowly, the truth is making its way through the web of deceit, not through confrontation, but through revelation. Because truth doesn't need defenders, chosen one. It simply exists. It waits patiently while lies exhaust themselves. It stands unshaken while deception eats itself alive. And now, that's what's happening. The lies they clung to for comfort are starting to suffocate them. The denial that protected them is now imprisoning them. The truth you spoke, the truth they rejected, has begun to echo through their lives, returning as consequences, lessons, and reflections. And you? You're no longer affected. You've learned that speaking truth isn't about convincing others, it's about liberating yourself. You've learned that silence can be sacred when it comes from strength, not suppression. You've learned that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of alignment. You don't need them to understand you anymore. You've outgrown the need to be believed. You're walking in the clarity they feared. Understand, chosen one, your role was never to be liked. It was to awaken. to awaken souls trapped in illusion, even if they hated you for it. The prophets of old were never celebrated in their time. The truth-tellers were never comfortable. The mirrors were always shattered first. But time always vindicates the voice of truth. Always. So let them misunderstand. Let them talk. Let them twist the narrative. You are not here to defend yourself, you are here to embody light. Because eventually, even the blind recognize the sun. And when that day comes, when their illusions finally collapse, they will remember every word you said. They will recall the warnings they mocked. They will revisit the truths they rejected, and they will see that you were never attacking them. You were trying to free them. You became a living contradiction to their narrative. You refused to carry their guilt, refused to bow to their false morality, refused to participate in their unspoken contracts of silence. You shattered the illusion that they were victims of circumstance, and revealed that they were architects of their own chaos. You made them see how much of their suffering was self-inflicted, and that realization was unbearable. So they projected it all onto you. Chosen one, they didn't hate your truth, they hated what your truth demanded from them. It demanded change. It demanded accountability. It demanded growth. And for many, that's too high a price to pay. So instead of evolving, they retaliated. Instead of reflecting, they deflected. Instead of saying, "Maybe they're right," they said, "How dare they?" Because it was easier to demonize you than to dismantle their denial. They resonated with the wrong person because the wrong person didn't challenge them. The wrong person told them that ignorance was peace, that silence was grace, that pretending was maturity. They bonded over shared avoidance, not shared wisdom. They found safety in each other's blindness. They mistook mutual dysfunction for connection. They mistook enabling for loyalty. They mistook emotional numbness for strength. But the truth always has a way of resurfacing. Even in their alliance of denial, cracks began to form. The conversations that once fueled their confidence now feel empty. The people who validated their delusion are beginning to reveal their own hypocrisy. The ones they trusted are showing the same manipulative traits they once accused you of. Slowly, the truth is making its way through the web of deceit, not through confrontation, but through revelation. Energy being exchanged to elevate your path. The universe was making room for authenticity. It was pruning your garden, cutting away what could no longer grow where you were headed. You see, chosen one, illusions cannot survive in higher dimensions. When you rise in frequency, everything built on falsehood begins to fall away. The friends who only resonated with your brokenness disappear when you begin to heal. The lovers who were addicted to your empathy vanish when you learn boundaries. The family who thrived on your silence turn against you when you start speaking truth. None of it is coincidence. It is energetic law. When truth rises, illusion collapses. Every door that closed was spirit whispering, "They can't go where I'm taking you." It wasn't their rejection, it was your graduation. You outgrew the frequency that once sustained you. You stopped dimming your light to keep others comfortable. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped feeding connections that only loved the wounded version of you. And in doing so, you stepped into your divine timeline. That's why they couldn't stay. Not because you weren't enough, but because you became too real for their illusion to survive. You thought you were being abandoned, but really, you were being extracted, pulled out of cycles that no longer aligned with your soul contract. Every loss carried revelation. Every ending carried deliverance. Spirit didn't take them away to hurt you. Spirit removed them so you could finally see who you were without their projections. You needed to know what peace felt like without having to earn it. You needed to remember what love felt like without having to suffer first. You needed to rebuild your foundation on truth, not trauma. When those doors closed, you begged for understanding. You asked, "Why me?" But now, in the stillness, Spirit answers, "Because you're not meant to live small." If those doors hadn't shut, you would have stayed in rooms too narrow for your destiny. You would have kept shrinking to make others comfortable. You would have kept watering deserts hoping they'd turn into gardens. You would have kept confusing loyalty with bondage. Spirit says, "I didn't let it end because you were unworthy. I let it end because you were chosen for more. And what you called loss was really liberation. What you called heartbreak was the breaking open of your heart, to receive truth unfiltered. The people who walked away were not your punishment, they were your confirmation. They confirmed that your frequency had shifted. They confirmed that your prayers for growth were being answered. You asked for peace, so chaos had to leave. You asked for clarity, so confusion had to go. You asked for divine love, so conditional love had to fade. Spirit honored every prayer, just not in the way your flesh expected. Chosen one, Spirit says, stop mourning what I removed. Stop grieving what was blocking your blessing. Stop romanticizing what I rescued you from. Those connections were not meant to endure your evolution. They were meant to ignite it. The moment they left, your spirit began to expand. You may not have noticed it at first, you were too busy bleeding. But pain has always been your prophecy. It doesn't destroy you, it delivers you. Every ending initiated an awakening. Every goodbye strengthened your discernment. Every betrayal sharpened your spirit. You didn't lose people, you lost false versions of love. The ones who said they cared but resented your growth. The ones who smiled in your face but prayed for your stagnation. The ones who called you too much when you began to love yourself loudly. Spirit says, I showed you their hearts. I exposed what you refused to see. And once you saw it, I sealed the door, because you deserve better. Now, look at what has replaced what you lost. Stillness. Strength. Clarity. Alignment. You're not surrounded by noise anymore, you're surrounded by truth. You no longer chase what doesn't reciprocate. You no longer explain your worth. You no longer beg to be seen. That's not loneliness, chosen one. That's sovereignty. Spirit isolated you so you could integrate your power. You're no longer emotionally codependent, you're energetically autonomous. So when doors close now, you don't panic, you pause. You say, thank you, Spirit. Because you've learned that divine rejection is divine protection. You've learned that endings are not exits, they're entrances to something higher. You've learned that separation is sacred, not cruel. You've learned that losing illusions is how you gain vision. Remember this truth, nothing real will ever be lost. Only illusions fall away. Only masks disintegrate. Only attachments burn in the fire, not love, not truth, not purpose. Spirit says, every door that closed was alignment. Every loss was a lesson. Every goodbye was sacred. You didn't lose them, you found yourself. And now, as you walk forward, Spirit is smiling through you. Because what was taken has been replaced with something unshakable, awareness. You no longer confuse endings with emptiness. You know that when one chapter closes, it's because the next requires a different version of you. You know that what departs is always making space for what is destined. You know that alignment doesn't come through holding on, it comes through surrender. So let them go. Bless every name that left your lips in grief. Bless every memory that once broke your heart. Bless every closed door that rerouted your destiny. Because the truth is, chosen one, you never lost anything real. You simply walked out of a dream and into divine reality. Every door that closed was the sound of Spirit saying, well done, my child. You've chosen truth over illusion. They're not coming back because they've changed, chosen one. They're coming back because your absence exposed the truth they tried to bury. Your silence became the mirror they couldn't escape. Your growth dismantled the power they thought they held over you. What they called closure was really an illusion. They thought you'd wait, that you'd stay orbiting around their indecision, that your light would dim without their validation. But when you rose, when you healed, they realized something terrifying: you were the source. You were the grounding energy, the peace, the wisdom, the light they mistook for control. They're not returning out of love. They're returning out of fear. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that you have outgrown the version of yourself they could manipulate. When they see you now, glowing, grounded, unbothered, they don't see the person they left behind. They see someone untouchable. Someone they no longer have access to. Someone who thrived without their approval. And that realization haunts them. Understand this: transformation threatens those who chose stagnation. Your evolution exposes their excuses. Your healing confronts their habits. Your peace convicts their chaos. You represent everything they could be but refuse to become. That's why they're trembling, not because they suddenly see your worth, but because they now see their own lack. You became the proof that their version of the story was a lie. You were never the problem. You were the prophecy. And they're terrified of what that means for them. They thought walking away would humble you. They thought betrayal would break you. They thought gossip would define you. But instead, every attempt to destroy you only refined you. You alchemized pain into purpose, isolation into intimacy with spirit, rejection into redirection. And now they stand at a distance, pretending they're ready for reconciliation, but deep down, they're afraid that the standard you now embody will expose how much they've settled. Spirit reveals this: they're coming back not because their heart has expanded, but because their comfort zone has collapsed. The people who once dismissed you are beginning to realize that they never actually replaced you, they distracted themselves from you. Every connection they sought after you felt hollow, performative, shallow. They tried to find your energy in others, but they only found echoes. The frequency you carry cannot be duplicated. And that truth is hitting them now, hard. Their love is not pure, it's panic disguised as affection. They feel the energetic gap widening, and their instinct is to reach out, not to repair, but to reclaim. They miss the control, the access, the emotional supply, the sense of power that came from watching you doubt yourself. But that version of you no longer exists. You have rewritten the script. You've become someone who doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't plead for understanding. You move differently now, not from ego, but from embodiment. You've learned that your peace is not up for negotiation. They will say they've changed. They'll use words like accountability and healing. But pay attention, it's not growth they're after, it's proximity. They want to stand near your light without doing the work to generate their own. They crave your energy, not your evolution. They mistake your empathy for an invitation. But Spirit warns you, discern the difference between apology and access. Not everyone who wants back and deserves entry. Some doors Spirit closed permanently, and reopening them would only dim your frequency. They're realizing now that you set a standard they can't meet. You didn't set it through words, you set it through being. You stopped explaining your worth and started embodying it. You stopped waiting for validation and began walking in truth. You stopped settling for almost and started choosing alignment. That terrified them. Because to rise to your level would require them to confront every lie they told themselves, every excuse, every unhealed wound, every avoidance. It's easier to call you difficult than to admit they're undisciplined. It's easier to label you cold than to acknowledge they're emotionally unavailable. It's easier to say you've changed than to admit they never grew. Chosen one, this is the truth. They're not chasing you, they're chasing the feeling they had when they were near you, that rare peace. That sense of being seen, that validation that came from your light touching their darkness. You were their spiritual mirror, and now that you've pulled away, they can't find that reflection anywhere else. They'll come back with nostalgia in their voice, but beneath it lies desperation. Not love. Not growth. Just fear of facing life without your energy to borrow. Spirit says, don't confuse recognition with repentance. Just because they finally see your value doesn't mean they're ready to honor it. Some people awaken too late, not because they're incapable, but because they were too comfortable in illusion. Their fear of losing you isn't about love, it's about losing access to the power that comes from proximity to truth. You became the measuring stick for authenticity, and now they realize how short they fall. This is the paradox of the chosen one. The same people who mocked your transformation will one day envy your peace. The same voices that called you crazy will whisper your name in reverence. But that doesn't mean they've evolved. It only means your evolution has forced them to confront what they refuse to face. So when they circle back, watch carefully. Their words may sound softer, but their energy will reveal their true motive. Are they seeking reconciliation or reassurance? Are they honoring your boundaries or testing your empathy? Are they drawn to your light, or are they trying to dim it again? Spirit says you'll know, because the new you doesn't need closure, approval, or permission. You've outgrown explanation. You don't need to slam the door, chosen one. You don't need revenge or resentment. Simply stand in your truth, and their illusion will crumble on its own. Because love rooted in fear cannot survive in the light of authenticity. They're coming back, not because they've healed, but because your growth has exposed their lack of it. Let them face that reflection, without you as the mirror this time. They're not coming back because they've changed. They're coming back because your transformation terrifies them. They're realizing you set a standard they can't meet. Their love is masked as fear, fear of losing access to what they didn't value when it was theirs. Spirit says, stand firm. Let them feel the distance their choices created. Because the distance between who they were and who you've become? That is the lesson. If this message hit your spirit, chosen one, it's because you were meant to hear it. Spirit doesn't send confirmation to the comfortable, it sends awakening to the aware. If your heart stirred while reading these words, it's because something within you recognized truth. You didn't stumble across this message by chance. You were guided here. You were called here. This was alignment disguised as coincidence. You are not reading, you are remembering. Remembering who you are beneath the layers of self-doubt, people-pleasing, and pain. Remembering the strength you buried to survive. Remembering the mirror you once were, the one that reflected truth so clearly that others mistook it for arrogance. But Spirit is saying now, it's time to reflect again. It's time to rise again. It's time to stop hiding the light that makes others uncomfortable, and start shining it brighter so that those meant to awaken can find you through the dark. This isn't just a message, it's a call. A call to the mirrors, the truth-tellers, the ones who carry divine frequency in human form. You are not alone. Every chosen one who reads these words, who feels that familiar vibration in their chest, you are part of something greater. We are scattered across timelines and lands, yet connected through spirit. We are the reflection that humanity needs to remember itself. So if this message resonates deep in your soul, don't keep it to yourself. The same way light breaks through darkness, truth multiplies when it's shared. Like this message, not for validation, but for vibration. Share it, not for attention, but for alignment. Comment the words, I am the mirror. Because when you declare it, you activate it. You tell the universe, I accept my role. You tell Spirit, I'm ready to be seen for who I truly am. I am the mirror. These 4 words carry sacred power. They are not a slogan, they are a spiritual signature. When you say them, you remind yourself and the unseen realms that you no longer shrink to fit comfort zones. You reflect truth even when it's inconvenient. You love deeply, but you no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as love. You are the mirror that shows others where they hide, but also where they can heal. Spirit moves through messages like this to reach the ones who've been questioning their path. The ones who've been wondering why their energy feels so different. The ones who've been shedding layers, losing people, breaking cycles, and feeling the isolation that always precedes elevation. You are not breaking down, you are breaking through. This message is your confirmation. So take a breath and anchor yourself in this truth. You are not crazy, dramatic, or broken, you are chosen. You were sent here to shift frequencies, to awaken souls, to embody love in a world addicted to illusion. That's why it's been heavy. That's why it's been lonely. But look how far you've come. Look at the strength it took just to stand where you are. Spirit is proud of you, deeply proud. Now it's time to amplify the message. Someone out there is crying for a sign. Someone is ready to give up, not knowing their transformation is just beginning. Your engagement isn't just digital, it's divine. Every like, every share, every comment sends out an echo that travels through the spiritual web, pulling other chosen ones toward their awakening. So if you feel this in your bones, if your heart is racing right now, that's Spirit confirming it's you. Say it with power. I am the mirror. Comment it. Declare it. Share it. Because every time one chosen one remembers, the world shifts a little closer to light. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to remind the world of its reflection. And now your light, your truth, your presence, is needed more than ever. The others will find you through the frequency you emit when you claim your truth. So let this be your activation moment. Stand tall. Breathe deep. Repeat it until it becomes your identity. I am the mirror. You are the reflection of divine truth. You are the embodiment of awakening. You are the reminder the world forgot it needed. If this message hit your spirit, it's because it was written for you. Share it to help the others remember who they are, because chosen one, this is your time. Your rise is not about fame, but about frequency. You are the mirror, and it's time for the world to see its reflection through you.